Louden Nelson, From Slavery to Philanthropy, dedicated to his love for education, by Franklin Marshall, illustrated by Maricela Marshall. When Louden Nelson was a boy, he would wander dreaming of a land far away. There he could be like a bird, soaring into the beauty of nature, roaming free without a care in the world, growing his own garden, fishing, laughing, and occasionally singing a song. How wonderful this would be, thought Louden. But just as he was imagining, a voice would call, saying, "Louden, come down here and get some water." Louden was 6 years old, and it was his mom, calling him to do some chores around the house. Louden and his family were slaves in North Carolina. Louden didn't quite know what that meant. He often played with his master's sons, Matthew, David, and William Nelson. They lived in the big white house out front. Louden and his family lived in the slave quarters with the other slaves. Louden grew and played, dreaming and having fun. Those days were fun, but he didn't know that the more he grew, the less playtime he would have. When Louden was 10 years old, there was a big change. He no longer was allowed to spend time with Matthew, David, and William, and would only see them as he passed by on his way to work in the field. Matthew, Master Nelson's youngest son, often came over to him to spend a little time talking. One day, Louden was talking to his mother while working in the field, and he overheard others talking about how they dreamed of freedom and not being slaves anymore. Louden asked his mom, "What is a slave?" His mother said, "You're a slave when someone else owns you, and you don't have freedom to do as you please. You must work when they tell you to work. You eat when they tell you. You eat what they tell you. They can even sell you to someone else if they choose to." This frightened Louden. Why did things have to be this way? Who can help us? Louden thought back to when he was 6 years old and dreaming about being free. Now, in his young 10-year-old mind, he longed for freedom more than ever. Louden thought about freedom so much that he would often find himself in tears for his condition and the people around him. One day he passed a church. He stopped to listen, even though he was afraid of being caught. He heard someone praying, "Please, God, help me. Please help." He decided that he would use the same words whenever he needed them. "Please, God, help me." Louden grew older. He worked hard. When he became a teenager, he noticed that some of the people that worked on Master Nelson's plantation were gone to some other farm. He knew they had been sold. He wondered, will this happen to me? Louden continued to work and tried to be optimistic. When he was sad, he remembered the dreams he had as a little boy of freedom, and this would bring comfort to him. As the years passed, Matthew grew to hate slavery too. He thought, why can't people be free to think and do as they please? He remembered how he and Louden had played together and the fun they had. He still stopped to talk to Louden when no one else was nearby. He could never be caught showing favoritism to Louden. His father, Master Nelson, would be very angry. When Louden was still a young man in his 30s, Master Nelson became very ill and died. To Louden, this was one of the most frightening times in his life. He worried about being sold to another plantation. He didn't know what would happen to him. The Nelson brothers were given their father's estate to be divided among themselves. Matthew wanted his share to include Louden. He wanted to be able to offer him his freedom. Matthew negotiated for Louden and some other slaves to be given to him. Matthew promised Louden that if he would come to California to help him dig for gold, he would give him his freedom. Louden could not believe his ears. Freedom! Matthew took his money, Louden, and several other slaves, and headed first to Tennessee and then to California for a new start. Matthew worked hard alongside the slaves he took with him to California. Louden was there to do whatever was needed as Matthew dug and panned for gold. Louden felt he was getting closer and closer to his freedom. Within 5 years, Matthew had made his fortune. He kept his promise to Louden and granted him his freedom. Louden was no longer a slave. Matthew went back to his family in Tennessee. Louden was now a free man. What to do? Traveling from town to town, he searched for a place to live where he could find his childhood dream of living free. Finally, he settled in Santa Cruz, a little town of only 800 people, where he was one of only 2 freed slaves. The people of Santa Cruz liked Louden. He had a pleasant manner that characterized hospitality. He got to know many of the town's people, who frequently visited him at home. Along with his freedom, Matthew Nelson had also given Louden money, enough to allow him to buy land. Louden was a cobbler, a blacksmith, and a farmer, and was handy at a number of other jobs. On his land, he began a business of shoemaking. He farmed the land and was successful in both businesses. Well, while in town one day, Louden heard that the only school in Santa Cruz was closing. The school was on the hill just above Louden's home, where he could hear the children playing every day. Well, often when he was working, the children's voices took him back to when he was 6 years old, feeling free as a bird, enjoying the beauties of nature. Hearing the children laughing, singing, and playing were a great pleasure for him. What would happen if the school closed down? Where would the children go to learn? This worried him, and he wondered what he could do to help. Louden continued to work hard until he became sick and was unable to work any longer. The people of the town soon discovered Louden's illness and helped care for him. Louden's health got worse. He knew he was going to die. During this time, the school, which Louden loved, was on the brink of closing. There were no more funds to keep it open. All Louden could think about was his childhood dream of freedom and the beauty of the children singing and laughing in the school on the hill. Louden vowed, "As I was given freedom, I will give my property to keep this school open." When Louden Nelson died, his property was left to the city of Santa Cruz. The school remained open, and as the years passed, the city grew. New schools were added. Today, the people of Santa Cruz are grateful to Louden for his generosity and for the help he gave to their first school. He gave a lifeline to Santa Cruz City's first school. The end.